everyone. I'm Glenda Dawson, and this is LD. Welcome to Glenda's Dragon's Den. We are in the Glenda's Magical Creations channel at the Conscious Awakening Network in Roku TV. We are also at Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and many other streaming platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Facebook. So please look us up every week. We're here on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. And we want to introduce two great people, very knowledgeable, very well known, and authors and paranormal investigators, and so many other things. Ron Yacovetti and Lourdes Gonzalez, welcome. How are you?
Hey there. Good. How are you guys?
Doing fantastic, fantastic. So, tell us about yourselves.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, first and foremost.
Yes, thank you. You
Thank
did
you for
good.
being had.
We appreciate it. This is a good time to be in the field and doing what we do. Media opportunities with shows that have audiences like you guys do. So anybody who entertains what we have to babble about, we're extremely grateful to have the opportunity and share your show for the evening. So this is awesome for us. You first, ladies first.
Well, like many investigators, I had paranormal experience as a young child. My family practices espiritismo. So what happened was that I saw something that traumatized me. So I from it for a very, very long time. And when they used to practice, I would like get upset about it. I would be the one arguing all the time because I didn't like it at all. And then I got divorced and I started dating again. And I was looking at an online dating service and I see this one here. Huh, he's kind of cute. And then I saw that he was a ghost hunter. And I said, well, that's interesting. And we started dating. And then he brought me into investigation. And I was hooked again. I was hooked. That first EVP that I got out of thin air, I was like, oh my god! And that was it. I was in love, and I was back at it again. So
Yeah, and
Very good.
she has an interesting skill set too with doing this. I've seen her grow from doing this. I started a few years earlier. We're in New Jersey on the East Coast, but I lived in Los Angeles for 14 years, and I started when I lived out there during that 14-year time at the Queen Mary, where I put hours in, and I do miss that place. And so I just ghost hunting, and then I had an early affinity for what's called ITC, instrumental transcommunication, which people know from TV shows as the ghost boxes or the spirit boxes, because I had seen EVP, which like her I loved, but when I saw somebody, and it's actually somebody, it's Chad Lindbergh from Fast and Furious. I know he did a show with John L. Tenney. 30 something people on the top floor of the Glen Tavern Inn. Everybody introduces themselves. The last two people say their names, and then it's Chad, and he goes, and I'm Chad. And not even 15 out of the sweeping spirit box, we hear the words, I know Chad. And I was like, what is he using? And how does that happen? And where do I get one? And I was hooked at the possibility of being able to actually communicate with spirit or whatever dimension it is in real time. And came my area of really, really high interest. And then flash forward now, which we'll talk about, we have, in the last 4 years, resurrected an old methodology called direct radio voice, which predates that. And that, for the two of us, has been an unbelievable ride. So that's how I got started. I don't know if I had experiences as a kid. I had some instances in where I grew up that at the time I may have been in denial, maybe afraid to have acknowledged this stuff was very shunned back then, as we all know. But now, it's like, it's almost not normal to have not had a paranormal experience at this stage.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot out there, that's for certain. Uh, it strikes me in reading the bios that you two approach it for more of the scientific, empirical data angle. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, and it means a lot to us that you even brought that up, because that is a lot of paranormal teams will say we're very scientific. We go out there and we try to debunk everything, and then if we can't, and to me, if you give your mind a mission statement, it's going to pursue it. If you go out to debunk, that's going out with bias, and I think headed down the direction that's already influenced. We go out and do our research here, and we let the moment or the location you going to, and then we try to assess on a case by case or instance by instance basis what we think we did or did not get. Um, so I think scientific gets thrown around a little bit too much, because just as methods go, people will say, well, the spirit boxes or the ghost boxes or stuff, they don't always work. If that stuff's real, why can't you just turn it on and do it? But by definition, for any methodology in anything to be considered scientific in nature, it has to be falsifiable. You have to
Mhm.
be able to create a false positive. That's one of the problems with string theory, that it's not falsifiable. Some people go, well, it's theoretical, but you can't really say that's a scientific a method or a concept that doesn't have the capability of being falsified.
Well, it's interesting. Before I met Glenda, when I would lead a team, uh, the team would only knew whatever they needed to do to stay safe. For instance, one of the clients had a very overprotective guardian entity. So the team was told specifically not to come into contact with her for any reason, not to get into any kind of an argument with her. They weren't told why, but that was the instruction. And they were also told not to discuss anything amongst themselves during the investigation, that everyone was to quantify their own data. And then after the investigation, we would gather together and sort through it individual by individual, with everyone, having equal weight, because everyone in the team was, you know, people that I had pretty much vetted and verified. So, I agree with you that if you go in with any expectation, positive, negative, uh, unconscious bias is unconscious bias, and I'm glad that you understand that. I have a very strong background in mental health. Former vice chair of resource development for Mahaney's, which is the Mental Health Association in New York State, the body that takes all the regional MHAs and works with them to help the legislature create a platform in New York State of mental health care that hopefully works for all of the regionals, because New York City obviously has very different needs than a more rural county of New York State. So, it's an important piece of it to me that you go in there respecting the entities, but letting them tell you the story, with the understanding that, just like people, they may not be telling you the truth.
That's
Right.
absolutely true. Like
Yeah,
that is so because they do lie just like people. So you
yeah,
just have
Yeah.
to, and you can't go in there thinking that everything that happens is paranormal, and you can't go in there thinking that everything can be debunked. You just gotta be,
yeah.
a healthy skeptic and go in there and do your thing, and you assess it accordingly.
Yeah, and it might not always be a lie either, too. Like sometimes, we joke around with our friends. You call somebody up and go, "Hey, you pretty that somebody delivering it," whatever. People joke around, so sometimes it could just be in jest too, and so people will flip out though, especially when they're new. They'll get on an novelist or something. They'll go, "Demon! It says demon. There's a demon here." I go, "If I say astronaut, it doesn't mean I'm going to space with Lance Bass on Tuesday.
Yes.
It's just what I said." You know what I mean? So you have to kind of assess with some level of discernment what it is you've got, and it's not always indicative of what she was saying, of bad or good. It's just what you got. And honestly, for me, if anything comes through anomalously, I don't care what it says.
That's
As long as it says it, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean that's
So Lourdes, you were saying that when you were young, you saw stuff, it scared you a little bit, so you shut it down. A lot of people do that. I'm Cuban, So I know what espiritismo is and all that other stuff. In my household, I have my mother who was a generational so-called witch, just a woman who knows a lot, has gifts, and my father who's very Christian. And my mother would say, "Shh, don't tell your father." But the thing is, it's like I was very blessed where I never really saw anything that would scare me. So I gotta say I was very blessed. I've never been hurt to this day. I
Right.
know I've seen a lot of people get hurt. I've seen a lot of people go into places, and what happens is instead of investigating, they instigate.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
Yes.
know if you have seen that, and then they wonder why they get hurt.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Because
you,
you bring in what you take. You receive what you give.
what you, yeah,
So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So,
But
um,
well, I guess I could. I don't read much, but growing up with the espiritismo, I was very I was used to what I would be seeing, and it would be, them channeling and the spirits and
right.
entities going into them. My mom didn't practice. We would go to these rituals and stuff like that, and I would see it all the time, and it was a normal thing to me. What happened was, one day we were there, and my cousin and Anna doing their thing, whatever, and my cousin bumped into my mom, and when she bumped into her, the entity jumped from my cousin to my mom. And
Mm,
that scared me because my mom's body started moving in ways that I know my mom can't move. And it was
mm-hmm,
terrifying to me and my brother. So ever since then, and then even the instance after that, that same night when everything was okay, my cousin was fixing something in the kitchen. And then this is another thing that I learned. Without permission, the entity went back into her out of the blue. So it
mm,
became a scary thing to me. I knew it was real and I knew that bad things could happen, but all of a sudden now it was not normal for me. It was like, whoa, you know? So, and that scared me for really for a very long. So, and I still had
under-
experiences because I would have dreams and stuff like that. And, you know, I
but
would
it's
have experiences.
understandable.
Yeah. But,
So what do you do now to see that that doesn't happen to you?
well, I don't practice. And that's funny that you say that because the time I was, we were in Hinsdale house and I was setting up some red pods upstairs
By yourself.
by myself. I was just setting it up.
Right, right, right.
Even though they were like, don't go anywhere by yourself because I love going off, doing things by myself, doing EVPs. But I wasn't even doing that. I was putting up the REM pods and I felt this entity coming towards me, rushing towards me, and it scared the out of me. And I ran upstairs and I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But nothing happened. I think it did affect me because I was kind of nasty for the rest of the night, which I'm not like
She
that.
wasn't nasty at all that night.
I'm not like that. But it did teach me something because then the next time, years later, like
Yeah.
how many, 2, 3 years later?
At least three. Yeah.
3 years later, we were in a mine in New Jersey, and the same thing happened to me but it was coming from behind. But this time, from the experience that I had in Hinsdale, I had my mind like, nope, this is not happening again. You're not doing this. And no, this is not happening. So when it came close, that's when my friend who was next to me, she runs the mine with her husband or her boyfriend or whatever it is, and she heard the entity, and she's like, "Did you hear that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I hear it because I heard it from way before." But then it stopped, and then we kept listening, and then you can hear it running off, running back to wherever it came from. So I I have my crystals, I do my little protections and stuff like that. That's pretty much what I do.
Mhm,
But I think it's all in the mindset, like your mindset of going in there and being strong and positive, not instigating or anything like
mhm,
that. And that's pretty much what I do. And that's it. But I was terrified of that in Hinsdale because of the history that I had when I was a child, because I felt like it would be something easy for it to do because it is a generational thing.
Right.
So
Uh,
so yeah. So,
And Ron, what do you do to protect yourself?
I have pepper spray. I used to use a pepper mill, but it's really hard to aim it at the spirit. No, um, I say I believe a lot of it's in the internal fortitude and will too. I think will is something that we learn sometimes through this the hard way. I had an attachment problem when I lived in LA. One time, it was over the course of mix until it kind of really made itself known, and I thought I was going to get out of doing this stuff, and I was like, maybe I should not be doing this stuff. And someone who picked up on it, and another shaman group who did a whole ceremonial thing and got rid of it. Great story now, not so much at the time. But one of the shamans sadly passed away from COVID within the last couple of years. But she would check up on me every so often from the West Coast, and then she said she could see that I was so much more grounded and strong, which I think is similarly to what happened with her. Is that just like fitness, when you tear a muscle apart, when you break down on a regular basis through exercise, what you're doing is you're giving opportunity through that and through nourishment and rest to rebuild and strengthen. And I think when these entities or these instances tore us down in our own situations, that's how we responded. But I remember at the time thinking maybe I should get out of this stuff. And I wrote in my first book that I used to news stories when you would see the surfer who was out on a surfboard his whole life since he was 3, and his shark took a chunk of his leg out, and now there he is back out there again. He's recovered, and I'm like, you're an idiot. Why would you do that again? But when this happened to me, I was like, I get it now. You don't want something or somebody to bully you out of what your life's passion has
Right.
become. You go out on your own terms, by your own volition, your own choice. But otherwise, no. Now, you know what? I'm going to get back in the saddle after taking a few weeks off. And I think that's a big part of how I was able to protect myself now going forward. And we were at the Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York, and we were doing a ghost box thing or something in the upper back area in the yellow, and there was a very talented medium, Scotty Davis, who was with us, and he was picking up on some creature. He said was some kind of crawler kind of thing, whatever, behind me. He goes, and then I saw his face just drop, and I went, what? Because first he had noticed that, and he goes, this is how he described it. He said he saw what looked like Thor, this gold kind of a thing. He said the light kind of emanated out of my side. It was this big thing. He goes, and as soon as this Thor thing came out, the crawly thing backed up and went back into the room and took off. So again, I can't, from any kind of empirical data experience, testify to more than this is a reputable medium and this is what he said. But I think that's all part of the same, how she did and how I did, to try to move
Right.
forward from some kind of trauma that happened to us, in this field, which is, an accepted risk at times.
right.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
we talking
believe
about.
I
Go ahead.
believe Lourdes called in her team of protectors when she said, "Oh no." And they're waiting for you to call them in. So you just did that. And that's why you're protected. And Ron, when you had the shamans do the ceremony, when a shaman does a ceremony to um, get rid of an attachment, they also do a protective shield. Because that's what I do. When I do that, I set the person with a protective shield. And as long as their inside is secure and grounded and they're balanced, that shield will remain really strong. So nothing is really going to get to you, or even if they attempt to, your inner light is going to shine brighter and brighter. So it's going to basically blind them. It's kind of like the saying, light as bright as you can, because then there'll be no darkness around you. It's the same thing. Um,
Wow,
Right.
so
very
that
nicely put.
that was yeah, that was very good, very good.
So you mentioned your first book. What's the title of that, Ron?
It's called Paranormally Speaking, Knowingly Talking to the Unknown, because that's what we spend a lot of time doing. We're looking for responses and dialogue with the unknown. We don't know ghost, spirit, entities, aliens, and we've had all different responses through what we do. So that's what it's called. It's got a little bit of how I got started in this field, including the story I just told, and then a foray into ITC, which is instrumental transcommunication, That's a term that was coined in the 1990s, I think 94, for people who are looking for the science in this stuff. It was a physicist named Dr. Ernst Sinkowski who came up with the name to delineate the difference between EVP, which is electronic voice phenomena, which is to record and review, and having dialogue in real time with spirit, which is what ITC is supposed to be. Um, so that was really what I got knee deep in. So I wrote about how I got into that, and then the methodology that she and I have resurrected about 4 years ago called direct radio voice, which predates the spirit box, the ghost box. If people know Frank Sumption and the Frank's box, this is all before that. And it's a lot more simplistic in its practice and how it works, but it's amazing.
And that book is available on Amazon?
Yes, sir. It is available on Amazon for both the Kindle and the paperback version. I'm a paperback or a hardcover book person myself. I like to have. I read so many different people. There's so many brilliant people in the field of what we do. We say this all the time. Where the field's not great because we're in it. We're in it because it's great. So both of the books I have are on Amazon, which is an honor. I appreciate that. That is book 2 right there. Thank you. Yep. Necromancy coming from technology, and necromancy, the communing with spirit. And it is, to quote Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is almost akin to magic. And that's what we do never gets old for us, right? When a voice comes out of the white noise and responds with an EVP, we never go, oh yeah, that again.
No. It's always amazing. We always get shocked like we're little kids, like, oh my
Yeah,
God.
she's great. She's like a little kid who saw a video game for the first time. Almost anything like that comes through, which is good because that's a reminder to everybody what passion looks like.
Now, you've resurrected a technology. Why do you think it lost favor?
That's an excellent question.
Well, thank you. That's why I sit here. It's not for my good looks, believe me.
Oh man. Well, you know what though? It's a great question because I don't get asked that enough. So what we brought back was a methodology, and what we did was infuse it with some technology. Direct radio voice was born of early EVP research in Europe. They used to use things like running water, you may have heard of these things before, or white noise from a radio to enable EVPs because you're talking about something that's detectable in some cases like EVPs to a recorder, but not to our hearing, which is capable of 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. And so they would use something for audio support to give something that does not create a disturbance or vibration that's detectable a little bit support. And from that, a lot of the communications told them that with the advent of the electronics are going to come out of the radio, so start looking for that or using that. But what happened was,
I knew you was going to say that.
When paranormal stuff became more mainstream and more widespread and popular through TV, that originates, of course, in America and Hollywood, what they saw was the sweeping, scanning through the radio ghost box methodology, which we love. We know some of the most brilliant people in the field who build devices. We own them.
And they work.
But what happened was there was a gentleman named Stefan Bayan who created a software called EVP Maker, and it fragmented sounds or alphabets of speech, the building blocks, and it would randomize it so that they could use those vocal tones, or so we thought, to come through and have a tone-friendly, audible sound when they made, just through thought forms that we could hear. Spirit boxes and the Spirit Box SB7s, and so those things took prominence on television, and then at the time this stuff was exploding onto the mainstream and the public, that was really the number one educational source for any of this stuff, was what was on TV or what was in the media. And so that became synonymous with ITC, not just like the main go-to. It became synonymous with it. The same way in combat sports, the sport of cage fighting is mixed martial arts, but people refer to it as UFC, even though that's an organization, because they branded it. Cotton swabs are known as Q-tips, even though that's a brand, because they branded it. This happened with the Spirit Box and then the Ghost Boxes. But the methodology of direct radio voice, we brought back because I had seen some of the European practitioners, a gentleman in Italy named Marcello Bacci, and now a good friend of mine, Dr. Annabella Cordosa, who sat with him. And Bacci was influenced by Konstantin Radove and Friedrich Gitten, who are some of the forefathers of EVP. And they were getting real conversations through white noise on an old vacuum tube radio, which is pretty much as low tech as you get. Vacuum tube pre-transistor, how they worked. And
Mhm.
unlike anything I'd ever seen a spirit box do, I've never seen a spirit box match what he was getting through a vacuum tube radio. And I looked at her and I said, "We're gonna buy a radio that has shortwave and long wave, and we're gonna sit in front of static, and then we're gonna listen to that static for as long as we listened to it the first time or more, and we're gonna try to milk this method because if they can do it, I would like to know through empirical experience that I can or that I can't replicate that." And it was a slow, steady, disciplinary grind. But the first time something responded to us out of pure white noise, no sweep, no human vocals in the fragments at
Just
all,
white
the
noise.
first time it happened, she hugged the radio in ways that made me jealous.
That became my favorite radio. It was just, it's amazing what they got because they would get full blown sentences, paragraphs. They were real time communicating just through white noise on a vacuum tube radio. Like he said, it was amazing stuff. And he was like, we both were like, why aren't people doing that here? But the thing is that it's a grind. We sat for hours and hours and hours of just listening. Shh.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are willing to do that. But what we did was is that we built a connection.
Yeah.
We built a connection, and now we're getting sentences. We've had, in instances, paragraphs. Them speaking
Nice.
to us, messages, and but that it did take a lot of work, and but if people are willing to do it, they can have communication too.
Yeah, and if you believe intent is part of spirit contact anyway, whether it's mediumship or through electronics,
Mhm.
nothing shows intent more than sitting in a static like that over and over on a routine schedule the same day at least. And then when the world shut down, we did even more.
Yeah.
Because and well, people were feeling withdrawn from paranormal because they can go investigate, everything's closed down. We never experienced that
We were good.
withdrawal. Yeah,
We were good.
because we were doing more sittings here. And so what we did was, to get back to what you asked, was the technology side took this pure white noise concept, and we did that for a while. And then we experimented with fusing different frequencies, which is called heterodyning, making one unique out of two, the sum and difference of those two fused together through a mixer, and all these different things. And then the end result, what we're doing now is that we're using sound filtration. And the point of it is the difference that Dr. Zinkowski, when he came up with the term ITC, instrumental transcommunication, was dialogue versus record and review. So we're looking at, well, what did people do with their sound? Like when anybody in the paranormal gets to evidence, they clean it up, they denoise it, they slow it down, they amplify it. Why wouldn't we do that in real time if the goal is to have conversation? So we used musical software for studio production, and we started filtering them in real time, just white noise. Um, then we use an AI that looks for speech to embolden it. So if there is none, it can't create artifacts. There's nothing for it to work off of, but it does seem to have an enhancement quality to it. And then I remembered some of the early pioneers talked about that vocals on EVP would come through faster than the human vocal tract is capable of doing. Faster. And we had an instance where we recorded a voice that I thought it said on, and it said mom, and it was my mother and grandmother, I believe, coming through, and I missed the whole thing because at 50% speed on playback, where I sound drunk,
Yeah.
and I assure you I wasn't, um, their speech was completely normal, clear, pronounced, no slurring, no stumbling. And she's a court reporter by trade, so she can tell you that nobody's capable of speaking that fast without stuttering or slurring, or I don't care if you're
That's right.
an auctioneer on cocaine.
The fact when they speak really like super fast, that you would think, how can they speak that fast? They usually slur words, or they'll mesh their words together because they're trying to get it out as quickly as possible. And this, he slowed it down 50%, was it? Was it 50?
For that specific one, yep.
And he sounds drunk, and the words are perfectly clear, crisp, clear.
Normal speed.
Yep, normal speed.
Normal speed. So that was one of our big innovations, because to my knowledge, in the history of ITC, of any kind of box or device or method, no one ever attempted to take live white noise and slow it down. But I felt like that was the key when I had that situation happen. So we did that, and now recently we've taken We've even taken the radio out, even though it's a vacant station and just white noise. We use a live white noise generator. So we're creating live white noise, which is all the frequencies, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, immediately upon creating it, filtering it, running it through our process, and we're still getting vocals that shouldn't be there. So we're trying to vet the process as much as possible, and that's where it's just like, so now we're starting to go places to do more stuff because people have not seen direct radio voice, let alone what is like an open line. We've sat at places, right, for like, we sat with Patty Negri in Massachusetts, and she literally sat in the room and asked questions, and it was like an open line. Like, she would say something, they would answer her, then it would go quiet.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, because so people don't get, when we say white noise generator, we don't mean a white noise machine, because the white noise machines, they are pre-recorded white noise. So it's recording. We literally have a real life white noise generator that produces the white noise at the moment. So
Yeah.
that's
So
important.
just so I understand, because I do have a background in audio, are you talking about effectively an amplifier as opposed to a generator, where you're picking up the white noise and amplifying it into an actual sound so that it's in real time?
It's an actual generator. It's got pink, brown, and white noise. We tend to use just the white noise because of the pink and brown, as you probably has a greater emphasis on the lower bassy sounds of the white noise versus the highs. It generates it. It has no speaker. So if you plug a 3.55 jack into the output, just a speaker, you'll hear white noise like an empty radio station. Otherwise, the box is completely silent. You don't hear anything.
Right, but how are you generating it in real time? What are you using for the source in real time?
So that is the source. That machine produces. It's got the circuitry inside. It creates the white noise, and then we just it's in that case.
Let's see if I find it.
To the right on the bottom, and then it creates it, and then we filter that through. Right. So I don't know that it's an opera. It's in the bottom underneath the lip to the right.
I guess we were trying to clarify is it like Reiki, where I get the energy that's all around me to send to somebody who needs healing? Are you picking up the white noise that's already there in vibration, in the waves, in real time?
It's an analog pink noise, white noise signal generator. It generates the noise, and that's
what it is, a white noise generator.
So that's it. You plug it in, the light's on, and then if you plug a speaker into it, it'll sound like an empty radio station, but it doesn't record and it doesn't receive it. It generates white noise.
There's no radio frequency.
There's no reception whatsoever. Yeah. So it's not capturing environmental white noise. It's generating it.
Okay.
And how then does the communication take place? Is it using that as energy to amplify its own ability to communicate in your mind?
He asks the best questions.
Yeah, he goes
yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
So I hope you know, you can watch 100 shows we've been on, that we don't get to ask these questions all the time. What we believe is something called stochastic resonance, where white noise has all the frequencies audible to us, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Right. If any frequency vibrates in resonance with one of those frequencies, what stochastic resonance says is that those two frequencies embolden each other, but not the rest of the white noise. So what was not detectable through that and through the presence of the white noise around it becomes detectable. And so you have a greater signal to noise ratio. And then what we're doing is, once they have the ability to use it through stochastic resonance, we're filtering out the noise through the software and then slowing it down. And then that's where we're getting the vocals that are coming through crystal clear.
So effectively, the resonance is being used to amplify and create the audible frequencies.
Yes. Correct. It's making it detectable where it would otherwise not be. We think that even ghost boxes may work that way, which is why the sweeping radios seem to have a brevity to the messages, where they're usually a couple words, compared to what we've talked about, where we've had long open dialogues that go on, because we think that maybe it's a misconstrued concept that they're using the fragments of vocal in the white noise, maybe to a degree because it's part of it. It does aid it, but I don't think that that's maybe what they're doing. I think maybe they're using the white noise even
That
in the.
bed of white noise. Because if you notice, a lot of times when you use the ghost box, spirit box, the the audio is either below the noise or above it. So we're thinking that wherever it resonates, if it's high or low, that's why you hear it. And really, what they're using is the white noise within the sweep.
Yeah, that's what we
That's what we think.
that's what we think.
Yeah, well, I mean that makes sense to me. Aside from the work I did as a volunteer, I did work for 23 years at Madison Square Garden, primarily doing audio. So, you're speaking to the choir here, and you want to talk about white noise and signal to noise ratio, and anybody who's ever been to an event at the Garden knows that that's a challenge to get anything in that arena. And they wound up installing, while I was there, a multi-million-dollar sound system to try and balance it all out. So, I think it's great that you guys have put in the time to find a way to create that resonance and factor in and out everything to the point where you effectively are amplifying these signals, because that's why I love when people are so sure of themselves, because our equipment is in the spectrum of sight and sound pretty limited, and coming up with that understanding and finding a way to capture it and bring it into our threshold is incredible. What are you doing with this to make it available to other people who would like to experiment with it?
Well, we've been a lot of lecturing events, and we've on our own Monday night podcast, Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence, along with our co-hosts Chris Allgood, Audrey Keeler, and then Tony and Sheree Rathman, who are also now doing direct radio voice. We've been doing demonstrations, and we've been explaining. We haven't gone all Geek Squad and done full like installs with the software, because we're still in an experimental stage of it. We'll try different components and different things in the process. The slowing it down was something that's fairly new that I came up with. And a lot of this really became fueled by the fact, and then we appreciate what you just said. A lot of that came from the fact that we watched this guy, Marcello Bacci, with a vacuum tube radio doing stuff that was blowing away what we saw ghost boxes do. And I went, how is that? He's not soldering stuff and installing circuits and stuff. How is he doing that? So we felt like part of the process has to be us. We have to be part of the equation, our energy, our resonance. And then there has to be something behind the purity of that method that not only lends itself to that clarity, but to the length of the messages. So a lot of the theorizing of stochastic resonance and things that we're talking about, that came from not just trying to replicate what he did, but also trying to understand how it happened, because we have this concept, and then maybe there's a little arrogance throughout society where we think that everything we do is superior to those, our elders, our parents, the people who came before us. But if you look at what they were doing with that stuff with direct radio voice in Europe, I haven't seen a TV show anywhere with any box that did anything close to what they were getting. The harsh fishbacks in Luxembourg, Mark Macy in Colorado, Dr. Anibal Cardoso in Portugal and Spain. And so we wanted to try to result and then try to understand it. And then we looked at, once we started understanding some of the concepts of sound and everything, how do we use that understanding to try to maybe do something to level this up, which is a big feat, because he left some big shoes, Marcello Bacci, to fill, and we're still trying to fill them. But that's where a lot of that came from.
I mean, even before we started with the software, where it was just strictly just the radio and no software, when we started getting voices, clear voices, there were a couple of people that were interested, and we told them what we did, and they went, they got themselves the radio and everything, but they didn't stick with it because they didn't expect it to be such a grind, because we sat for 2 years, once a week, every week, for 2 years, sometimes twice,
Yep.
and it was a lot of work, and not a lot of people willing to do it. So we did share it, you know, prior to the software. We got into that later on, but we did share what we were doing because people were like, "Oh wow, I want to do that," and they spend the money, they got their radios or whatever, and they didn't stick with it. So it just, you know,
Yeah,
they moved on to other stuff.
that's a fantastic point because we think we developed the connection. The one thing, by the way, Marcello Bacci, very important for people who do spirit communication because he was vetted in ways that people today never have to be. They put him in an RF shielded room. They had him work with the radio open. The one guy named Paolo Presi from Il Laboratory, which was an Italian paranormal team that had scientists and everything on it, said, "I'm going to take one of your 3 vacuum tubes out. If you get voices, I'm taking out 2. If you get voices, I'm taking out all 3. If you still get voices, I'll eat the tube." And guess what? 1 tube, 2 tubes, 3 tubes. He still got voices. And Bacci looked at Presi. He goes, "No, no, don't eat tube. It's glass." The only thing they could remove from the equation to stop the voices coming through was Bocce. When somebody else sat in on his radio, they couldn't replicate what
Right.
he did.
Right.
So the sittings, the routine we did, I think that has something to do with it. We did make it available to people in the beginning, and they were fascinated. And she's right. I don't think they stuck with it discipline-wise because there's an instant gratification to a ghost box. You turn it on, it's sweeping. You ask questions, you get some answers. It's fascinating, and it works.
And it works.
But I wanted to try to do what these people had done, and that took an investment of time and energy to try to make it happen. And then we evolved our process. We tried everything.
Right.
Well, if I understand you correctly, there's also the concept of conduit. And the two of you have allowed yourselves, perhaps as he did, to be conduits to facilitate that amplification, to facilitate that phenomena. And, you know, that could be why other people couldn't do it because they weren't able to open themselves up to be that conduit. So,
Yeah, definitely.
you know,
Definitely. And it's different than channeling, too. That's another thing. A lot of times people will say, well, spirit box or ghost box or ITC is akin to channeling, like a Ouija board. But it's, I think that our energy is part of the equation, but we're not the actual medium. And that's where the
right.
digital seance initiative that we do is that the radio is actually the functional medium. That's facilitating the contact. But I do agree with you. I think that our energies are part of it, and the intentions and what we bring collectively is definitely a part of the equation.
And
So
the purity of that intention.
Right.
That's
It's
right.
like,
That's right.
you know, a medium. If you are doing mediumship, if you don't stick with it and you don't dedicate a certain amount of time every week or whatever, it you're not going to have that connection with the other side.
That's right.
It's the exact same thing. So you guys basically connected with the other side through that medium,
yeah,
but it's just in a different way. So
And
Okay.
it's as Tesla said, it's all about frequency. Uh,
hmm
Glenda can communicate multidimensionally with different beings because she has developed the capacity of working on those frequencies, which are amplifications above 3D.
hmm
So it sounds like in the genre of physics, you're both along similar pathways.
right.
absolutely. And the word you used was spot on. She developed it. That's something that you, even if you have the innate ability to do, there's a development and growth process involved with doing it. Absolutely. And so one of the things that fascinates me too is that people will go, well, if it works, why doesn't it work 100% of the time? Nothing works 100% of the time. I have an electromagnetic device that I pay Verizon for every month, and it doesn't always work, right? But it's meant to use electromagnetic waves or energy to communicate with someone who's not in my physical space. So if I go by the scientific idea that they say replicating it 3 times in a row under the same conditions, which by the way Marcello Bacci did, um, and I call my father 10 times today and he picks up once, by that stretch of logic, which is not really a fair barometer, by that stretch, my father doesn't exist because I have a 90% fail rate and I didn't do it 3 times in a row. What it removes from the equation is free will. And if you're looking to communicate, there's an implied intelligence. And implied in intelligence is some choice and some free will. So sometimes
Mhm.
maybe they're like, when you get a call from one of your friends, like, oh, I don't have time to talk to this guy now. I'll never get off the phone. Or you're going into the bathroom or you're at work or you have no signal. So there's
Right.
factors involved, for one, and for two, we learn and we borrow from the concept of what accepted physics is, and not from a Newtonian materialist science background, but from something a little bit more open, more of an idealism scientific approach, because 50% of this equation is not within our control at best, wherever they're coming from, wherever the voices are. And so we look for consistencies and inconsistencies when we do this also. Like it's odd to me that a lot of people will say that the spirit realm or wherever they are does not have linear time space to do. And then they go,
Mm.
we're trying to figure out what the ghost frequency is, which is kind of a conundrum because frequency denotes cycles of time, right? Oscillations per minute, oscillations per second. So if you don't have a measure of time, then what is your measure of frequency when you get to that point in the process where they are? And I think that's an interesting thing. It may have to do with quantum mechanics, and we think maybe possibly the wave function of light, the photons of light have wave function
Mhm.
until they interact with something, that function collapses. We got vocals doing direct radio voice in that New Jersey mine, which was like a geographic Faraday cage. There was no cell or radio signal whatsoever. And we got voices through the white noise. So,
And we were deep inside the mine.
yeah.
Like, and we got voices. We got voices. I mean, we got Johnny Zaffis's name.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
That was quite fun.
Well, in the free time that may or may not appear in the future, I'd be curious to have Glenda sit in with you guys with her ability to go multidimensional and see if that would have some positive effect on the ability to communicate. But I'm not trying to put you guys on the spot. It's just something that I'm considering, because on the other side of it, I scuba dive, and the only time where I can get a really clear head is when I'm below an atmosphere of water, because that seems to deaden the ability for all of those frequencies to get into my head. So,
Yeah. Because most of those frequencies are higher than that, right? When they used to use for submarine communication, they used VLF, which because
right.
of the length of the AM waves would propagate through the water, which is funny because Mark Macy, who's in the EVP and ITC Pioneer, got gotten a phone call from one of the founders, Konstantin Radove, telling him to employ the use of VLF, very low frequency. Now, what was remarkable about that phone call was not just that he told him to use VLF, was at the time that he got the phone call, Radove was dead for about 25 years, and he came through his phone and he recorded. But that's what he told him to use. So what you're saying completely makes sense with where you would get that experience under the water.
So I would like to take a little detour because we do have common ground. We actually seem to have quite a bit, but specifically the Morris Jamel Mansion. If I can take you guys there for a moment. I, without any equipment, without any, when I went there for my orientation as a custodian, I was there early. I walked the grounds a little bit, and I was aware of two strong entities, and they were not in the same place. Now, I haven't looked at any of your data from that, but were you able to identify entities at the mansion?
Well, I will say, and then you can take over. We've been there a couple times.
Before we started direct radio voice, we weren't doing it yet.
We weren't doing the direct radio voice what we're doing now. So it's at least 4 years since we've been there.
Yeah.
And we love the place. We definitely had activity going on with some of the ITC stuff, the devices we ran. We did get some good responses for sure.
Well, one interesting thing that did
and we
happen.
live very close to it, by the way.
We are so close
it's
to
like
it.
right across the river where we are. We're right off the Hudson River in New Jersey.
So, but the person that, like, our contact guy that was there, he's no longer there. But we should get back there. But there was one interesting instance where We had the REM ponds. What else did we have? We had the REM ponds. We had the K2s.
Mm-hmm.
We had a
Oh
couple of
yeah.
things set up.
Yep, I remember.
And it was, I guess it was around the 4th of July,
Sure was.
maybe.
Sure was.
And, you know, the fireworks went off. And everybody's like, oh, the fireworks. And all of a sudden, everything went, it just went off. The REM pods, the K2s, everything. And we were thinking that maybe it sounded gunshots, battle or whatever. It made everything like,
A
but
literal trigger.
yeah, it was crazy. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, they were all dormant until that happened, and all of a sudden, all these things started to light up from EMF spikes, and we're like, it was just really weird, and that's the first thing we thought. Again, we're speculating, but we
Yeah.
thought maybe because that was an area that General Washington was
Right.
at, because you could see the Palisades from there, and all of Manhattan before there was development, you could see the vantage point was really good.
The lookout.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we thought maybe that triggered some activity in the environment because fireworks going off in the distance did sound reminiscent of gunshots.
Yeah, it's a great place to get EVPs and stuff like that. I don't know if we ever identified what was there.
So you know
People
who
had,
did though? Remember
oh, Mariah.
our friend Mariah Cunow from San Francisco? She was on Surviving Death on Netflix, and because they brought her on a show to do an episode there, but we introduced her to the place when she came out to visit the East Coast, and she loved the place, and clearly the people in that place loved her. She's fantastic, and so she ended up doing an episode from that place. But she did identify, I think, who was the matriarch? Who's the main?
Eliza?
Elizabeth? Eliza Jamil.
Eliza.
Yes, I believe she identified her and a couple of others who had been on the premises or at one point. And then there obviously, too, a lot of historic places when they change hands and when they function as different things over the years, not all the history is documented either. So some of it's difficult to corroborate.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the two players I got were kind of in what I would call a mortal combat with each other,
Wow.
because they had a very intense experience in their lifetime. And we can talk about that or not going forward, but I was just curious, and yeah, Eliza was one of them. So
Yeah, it's a great place.
what are you guys looking to do going forward? Because you're not that far away from us. I'm pretty familiar with the area you're discussing. I lived in West Nyack for 18 years.
Okay.
So that's not too far north from, the area you're familiar with.
Right.
But going forward, what do you see yourselves doing? I know you have a third book coming out.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that we can see ourselves doing is taking you up on an invite to perhaps sit down and have something collaboratively, because I do believe that any of those kinds of stuff, I don't think that mediums and mediumship and what we do, or what we do in science, I don't think all those things are at odds at all. I think if you understand how they work, I think that would be an amazing pairing. I think a lot of times mediums are misunderstood. People, it's funny because in studies of consciousness, they say that more complex and detailed thoughts have greater activity in the frontal lobe and the hippocampus of the brain. But when mediums go into trance, there is little to no jump in the activity in those parts of the brain at all. But the messages are very complex and very detailed. So that's an interesting thing where science supports the authenticity of what mediums do. I'm big on that whole thing because people always with, science, and there's a difference between scientific and scientistic. Scientism is very cultish, closed-minded. Science
Right.
is a different thing. It's a method of inquiry, not an ideology. And I think that's very lost in what we do because we're a TV media launched industry, really, for the most part now. So to get back to the question, because I actually remember what it was. Made that seem yeah, so we would love to do something, guys, like that. That would be fascinating. We have in 2 weeks, we're doing
The Hanover Tavern Paracon.
Yep, in Hanover, Virginia.
Yeah.
We're doing a speech, a lecture, and a presentation and investigation down there.
Then we're doing the Dead Ends
Actually,
with About Truth. Oh, go ahead.
I have a student that told me about you guys and she's going there, and she's so excited. She's
Oh,
actually on the chat, Ashley. So she's going to be looking for you guys
Oh,
please,
when you're
yes,
yes,
there. Yeah, so
Ashley.
yes, that would be
And I
fantastic.
want to give a shout out too to Christopher DeCesare, who, you know,
introduced us.
what?
Introduced us.
Yes,
Yes.
who created
Yeah.
this potential for us to sit down with each other.
Right.
But I do want to get your third book in there, right? You have a book coming out
Yes, please.
in
Third book is called The
February.
Digital Seance. Yep, February
All
Digital
right, can we
Seance
get that up
Initiative.
on the? Oh, fantastic!
Yep,
There you go.
perfect. Thank you. I love that. And basically, it's a little bit of the fee of what we do with direct radio voice and ITC, and it's a lot of empirical accounts of experiences that we've had, and I'll let her maybe share one or two of them real quick. But we've taken this um, because we believe that with a collective consciousness, what's called morphic resonance, that you have a group of people together. That if you have a shared focus like that, that is also another amplification method and an
Mm-hmm.
action method. And so we took the seance sitting, like a leader-driven seance sitting, and we fused it with direct radio voice, which is what Marcello Bacci used to do, very focused sittings in Italy. And we took it to different places to do it, and we have had people send us stories and evidence the next day of connecting with different ones, and they've had these profound life-changing experiences, they closure or whatever it was, and this is something that is very aligned with the mentality and the type of person Chris Cesare is, um, touching people in a very positive way. We're gifted to be able to do, and so we love that. That book has a lot of those stories in there.
Yeah, we had one instance of girl. She's listening to that we're doing the digital seance initiative, and she hears a voice that sounds like her grandmother. So she's like, "That sounds." So she asks, she goes, "That's you. What show did we used to watch when I was a little girl?" And clear, it says Dr. Roberts. We're looking like, what the heck is Dr. Roberts? She started crying. She's like, "Oh my God, that's the name of the show we used to watch." And sure enough, I looked it up. There's some that was called Dr. Roberts, and it was life changing for her. Life changing.
Yeah,
We had a friend whose son had recently was in it and passed on. He came through, life changing for her. We had another
Mm-hmm.
friend, his grandmother, life changing. So things that we noticed that the collective consciousness, who we are, our intent, it is part of it. And we feel so blessed that we are able to do this and to provide that closure or that solace or that, just hearing
yeah.
their voice because they miss
Right.
their voice and give that to people. And that's a beautiful thing.
We
And,
should we should
it's a
have
good
you
thing.
join us. We've done it the first one we did, and then we did one most recently in November at the Pine Bush UFO and Paranormal Museum. And it
Mm.
was
Oh,
phenomenal the
yeah.
last time. We sold it out with a waiting list. And there were people in the audience who we did two sittings, especially for the second sitting. The group whittled down to what we thought was the really more focused and intent people. And there was a lady who her father to her. She's like, "What's it like on the other side?" I could send you the link to the video. What's it like on the other side? And a female goes, "It's complicated." Thought we heard it, and when I think it said something, then a male voice repeated it and clarified. It's complicated. This is through the white noise, pure white noise, through the whole room. It was unbelievable. So,
And then
um,
I asked, "Can you say her name?"
yes,
Clear as day. It goes, "Isn't it Cindy?" Yeah, we were like,
yeah,
and she was so happy.
it named her.
Yeah, it was,
So
but with the prior group, the group that came before, we stuff, but it wasn't as intense as it was when the group got started, and it was more of a hardcore that really, and the
Focus.
communication amplified. Yep,
yes,
yep.
Right.
yes.
Focus.
So
We're almost out of time. You
Yeah.
guys said you do a podcast. Can we, get that up for the people who are listening?
yes,
What is?
Monday nights 9 p.m. live. It's via StreamYard. It's on Facebook and YouTube. It's called Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence. It's on the UN-X UNX, as for Unexplained Network. That's Mondays. And we also this kind of cool thing just to throw in March. We're spending 2 nights. If you saw the documentaries on Amazon called The House in Between, we were invited by the homeowner and two of the investigators to go spend 2 nights in that house and do direct radio voice.
Nice.
And we are like over the moon for
Yeah.
this opportunity to be able to do what we do at that. at that. But the show Monday nights is Entity Voices, Paranormal Evidence, and we bring people on to showcase the community of investigators
Yes.
and what they get and how they get it and where they get it, because you can't be part of a and not give something to it. So there's so many brilliant, talented people out there, and we use that show as a platform to show that.
Yeah, so it's not about us. We let other investigators come in.
Every so
New,
often about us.
every once in a while, but it's new investigators or investigators that have been doing it for years, and
Yeah.
they come and they present the methods that they want to share,
Right.
and that's what it's all
Mhm.
about, to showcase others.
Yeah, when we have, sometimes we'll
Okay.
have a show, we don't have a guest booked, and we'll use that to show some of our own
Yeah, when
evidence.
we don't have a
So people
guest,
see what we do research wise. We're in the field also, and it's always fun to
every once in a
share
while,
what
yeah.
we do also.
Well, we want to thank you
Yes.
because we are
Well,
over.
yeah. uh, it's been great. I love to hear from you guys. Please do send us that link. We really want
Yeah.
to see it, and we look forward to hearing more and communicating more. And just want to thank everyone who was here, who will be hearing or listening or seeing this later. And I want to let everyone know that next week we have Madam X. She's a European American high priestess, a teacher, a writer, and just so much more. So, again, Glenda's Magical Creations channel on the Conscious Awakening Network, and look for us there, and Glenda's Dragons Den every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everyone.